following al-Qaeda members? And did the hijackers have links to the government of Saudi Arabia, an ally of Washington? Last weekend, the Biden administration declassified the first document ordered by the president. It's a long secret FBI report. No smoking gun, but let's bring in Tim Golden. He's writer and editor at ProPublica and has been chasing these questions for years. Hi, Tim.
Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, and first, tell us, what is this report, who wrote it, and why?
This is a report by what was called Operation Encore. That was a decade-long follow-on to the original FBI investigation of the 9/11 plot. And that whole investigation had really been almost entirely secret until we first reported on it extensively last year. And this report that came out on the anniversary of the attacks was a kind of compendium of circumstantial evidence and leads that had been developed by the Operation Encore team. It is kind of an inventory of different pieces of evidence that were found connecting particularly a couple of Saudis linked to the Saudi government with two of the hijackers, who were the first two men from the plot who arrived in the United States in January of 2000.
In this document, what more do we learn about direct, indirect ties between the hijackers
Might be time to turn
and
on
the Saudi
Saudi.
government, the Saudi consulate in the U.S.?
20 years
It had
later.
always been known that two of the hijackers had met up with a kind of a shadowy Saudi man who was a graduate student in San Diego and who claimed to have run into them by chance at a little restaurant in Los Angeles. And what turns out, according to this document, is the meeting seemed much more deliberate and almost kind of a secretive operation to connect them right after this Saudi had left another meeting at the Saudi consulate in Los Angeles and had gone directly to wait for them at a particular restaurant.
It's almost
He
like
then
the things
invited
that
them to San
Michael
Diego.
Moore
He found them an apartment immediately. He lent them money briefly, and he helped them in all sorts of other ways. And these were two guys who, although they were pretty well trained as terrorists, really couldn't speak English at all, couldn't understand street signs, couldn't navigate their way around a Western society. So they were sort of lost without significant help.
And as you kind of step back and look at these big investigative questions, how important is this new knowledge, I think?
Well, I think it adds to the picture in a pretty significant way. What it shows you is that this Saudi, who had already been investigated by the FBI as a spy before 9/11, was in touch with some other Saudi government officials who were part of the religious bureaucracy of the kingdom and were also assigned in the United States as diplomatic personnel. And those two Saudi religious officials, in turn, had a whole bunch of connections to other militants, to people who were connected to al-Qaeda, to people who were connected to other terrorist plots. So the picture has really gotten much more complicated.
Sounds like it's starting to
As you're
unravel.
describing it, these are important connections to understand more about. We're here 20 years later. This document is heavily redacted. The victims' families are asking for a lot more from the government. Why would the federal government, this administration, previous administrations at this point want to be so secretive?
That's a great question. That has been one of the big questions surrounding this entire episode. What are they hiding? And it's really striking to see this document that the Attorney General of the United States, Bill Barr, during the Trump administration, went to court to assert that this was a state secret, that the publication of this document could imperil the security
Barr
of the
and
nation.
Trump are involved
And
in
when
it.
you read this, you think, well, this is certainly embarrassing. It certainly
Bush was
suggests
involved
that
in it.
a couple of lower-level
Clinton
Saudi
and
religious figures had some connections to these
Obama were helping
hijackers
cover it
and
up.
to possibly to militants or terrorism that was not known. But it doesn't look anything to me like a state secret. And I've done a lot of reporting in this area, so I think what is
Because
still
they know what's behind it.
being held
Trump and
back
Barr know
and
what's
why
behind it.
are really big
Neocons.
questions here.
The
They're all
families of some of the
Taliban.
victims have a lawsuit against the Saudi government. Does this push them, any further in the direction they want to go?
I think it helps them